يسقي خلو بچات ناس لگا دی خلو بچا دی اور يسقي يسقي هاي دي خبر نكي وجاتا بس خالي دي هذا خلو هو جاتا.
This is Hajirapur. He is the Baba, or father, of a secret hashish culture in Central Asia called Malangs. Today he is administering a secret hashish ritual for his brother Malangs. For the ceremony, the Baba is loading a half-pound of freshly pressed hash. Malangs are assassins in the Muslim world. Webster's literally defines them as a Mohammedan secret cult which practices secret murder committed under the addiction of hashish.
They wander around and are the executioners for society. You know, some woman commits adultery, they stone her to death. Some guy steals, they cut his hand off. So in a sense, they are the executioners for society. And they're not really corruptible. They can't own worldly possessions. They can't be married. The old ones were kind of more keeper of the local area. But these young ones would travel through. You'd see them because the real assassin's a traveler. You know, he's like a traveling judge. And they'd travel through and come to the hash shop and, you know, knock everybody away from the pipe and smoke a quarter pound of hash and, you know, stay an hour, have tea and go.
And it's part of a culture that started in the Persian mountains.
The French, being the first to encounter these men during the Crusades, dropped the Arabic H from Hashistan and came up with assassin. And we have since redefined it as a political murderer. Originally it was a cult led by
a very powerful Persian ruler named Hussein Sabi. Had a mountain fortress outside of Tehran, and he'd go into the outlying valleys and capture young boys.
He'd bring them into this impregnable mountain fortress, completely control their education from that early age. There are no women at the compound, not even female animals. They're exposed to the Quran as the only teaching tool. And then when they became young adults, he allowed them to smoke hash to keep them docile. I think it's very hard to keep a young, virile man out of the realm of reality of women and material possessions and greed and the things that are around us at all times.
And then he would feed them hash, and they'd pass out.
He'd bring them into this walled garden that he maintained,
that had all the virgins and all the wine and all the honey and all the milk and all these pleasures of the human sense that they'd never seen or even knew of, other than through the mentions in the Quran. And the Quran does promise a faithful Muslim, especially someone who dies in a jihad, 72 virgins. And they'd spend 3 days in this paradise. And then they'd be fed hash again, pass out, be brought into his courtyard, and told that
you've been to heaven. You've had a glimpse. Allah has given you a glimpse of paradise.
Now, if you go kill this man, even if you die doing it, the worst that can happen to you is you'll immediately go back to this paradise.
I mean, God, can you imagine? Here's a 28-year-old guy who's never, you know, doesn't know what a pussy is. Suddenly he's got 72 of them, you know, doing all this stuff, and wine. Didn't know about that either. Milk and honey aren't bad. I think that whole sexual frustration among young Arab men is still being played out in the suicide bombers of today. I mean, you know, these guys, if you don't have a house, money, a position, no mother is going to give you her daughter. So you're faced with being a celibate, basically. You know, and even the ones that live in America and supposedly have Babylon at their fingertips end up living 10 in an apartment and going still 5 times a day to the local mosque and praying. So they're not getting any closer to being laid. They're just being tempted more. I think that was well proven when 4 of the suicide bombers that ended up at the trade towers were at a strip club in Miami a few days before, looking at paradise before they went.
And they actually, it's very interesting. Your wife goes to another place. She gets to go to heaven, but she doesn't get to go to the same heaven you do, because I guess it would be embarrassing for your wives to watch you ravage 72 virgins.
So we're going to Johnson County Junior College to meet Seville. She doesn't like me to call her my new wife, my wife. She gets offended by the term new. I guess that denotes more than one. which unfortunately there have been.
Which one is she?
She's actually number 4, if I keep count right. But in defense of my flaky background, I did stay with one for 18 years while the boys were growing up, my 2 sons. So I don't count her as a wife because we never got married. So, but Seville counts her. So she's number 4. Baby, I'm gonna park. The advantages of having my 85-year-old father's parking permit.
We met in Baku, and we were working together. So, how did you meet? You tell that story. I didn't know anything.
It was a mutual friend that introduced us.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a rather chaste environment over there. So we were, you know, not arranged, but, you know, to some degree an arranged situation, you know. He talked to her about my intentions. And she agreed to try after she heard what my intentions were.
Yeah, first it was like, what? It's impossible, no. But then after, you know, I started to think about that, and James, he started to say, oh, he's a good man, he has a good family, you'll like it, so you just try it. Maybe you will be happy or whatever.
And it's been going on 1.5 years?
Yeah, it's a year and a half.
I got married in August. It'll be 2 years in August.
Yeah. We went together to Georgia because I was going to get my visa in Georgia. It's a country. So...
they turned us down.
Yeah.
First time.
First time was terrible. Yeah, they said... they asked, you know, a lot of stupid questions like, why did you marry him? He's, you know, he's elder than you, you know,
What is the 43 years, 44 years?
No.
I mean, 35 years.
35 years, yeah. So,
Between us, yeah.
so she said that's not a real marriage, and she said, what is your proof? And I started to show her letters and pictures, but she said, I'm sorry, I can't give you a visa. So first time she refused us, that American woman in the American embassy, and then...
I got my local congressman to write, you know. I mean, Kansas is a small state, and my family has been here for 100 years, and we have a few contacts in a modest way. So we got the local congressman to write more to the State Department and say what's going on. This is, you know, unfair. And so they gave me the visa.
Yeah, and then I came here. 6th of April, I came here. And when I came to the airport, that was terrible. They were like...
They actually, because of my connections with the Al-Qaeda and my work in the past, I'm on a hit list for the U.S. government as a terrorist. So we landed from Gatwick, from the London airport, we landed in Atlanta, and they actually were waiting at the gate, actually waiting at the door to the plane to arrest me, or not to arrest me, to detain me. And of course, detain Seville. What did they interrogate first?
She said he's a terrorist. And how do I know that you are not a terrorist?
Oh, that's my car.
Here, Dad, you want to come grab this?
Yeah, I'll give you a hand.
Okay. Okay, I got it. Now this painting over here is from an article that my dad was in from going to Afghanistan the last time, and he actually grew this beard, and the picture was him in this turban, and he was holding his AK-47. So I guess part of it, like the background being dark, is my dad's always kind of been a mystery to me. Even though he's told me his stories, I don't know which ones are real and what to believe, what's actually gone on in his life. So I think that there's some of that in there, and as well the gun. I don't know. That kind of represents maybe the life he's chosen. You know, a life that was dangerous, was, you know, deadly.
On Fridays, I discovered that for entertainment after prayers, they'd all bring their fighting dogs from all the villages and all the nomads around would bring their fighting dogs into just the edge of town by the graveyard, and they'd have a giant seguani, they call it, which means it's a dog fight. And it was interesting. They make a giant circle, maybe 200, 300, 400 people, 1,000 people, maybe 100 dogs, 200 dogs, maybe 50, you know, all different sizes. And they bet money. And the Seguan, the guy who led the negotiation, stood in the middle of the circle and negotiated with this guy, because it would be, the perimeter would be people, spectators, and then the inner circle would be the dog owners. And it was always 2 guys per dog, and the dog was held by 2 ropes in check, and there was a row of these dogs all the way around the arena. And the Seguan would go around and negotiate with different dog owners based on weight, family feuds, based on whatever, betting, which dogs would fight. And then these dogs would come out 2 at a time and fight. And the owners got to go out to the middle of the circle and actually kind of lay down. They had to lay down so everybody could see. They could lay down by their dog as it was fighting. You know, and these are, you know, 100-pound dogs that are tearing each other apart. I mean, the last place you want to be is in the middle of them. So I realized right away, these guys are like their dogs. They're pretty ferocious. You know, I mean, they're pretty scary people.
So, you know, the dogs represent what the men are. And I was never able to film, but I saw great depictions in historical accounts of these men and saw the pelts of these men going after mountain lions barehanded. They didn't want to use a rifle on it because they didn't want to put a hole in the pelt. So they'll wear their heavy, they have this really, the nomads have this really heavy felt coat called a kosei, which literally means great coat. It's made out of felt about a ½ inch thick. Well, they go after the mountain lions with that coat because they say the claws are the only really dangerous thing. So they wrestle the mountain lion down and slit its stomach. So these are men that are not like men that we know of. These are men like Paul Bunyan, and you know, these are legendary men that we talk about in fiction.
You couldn't walk into a nomad camp because they'd stake their ferocious dogs out with different length of rope, and the kids would know how to weave in. Because they don't domesticate their dogs. Nobody. The owners don't pet them. They're not for that purpose. You know, they're there just to keep the coyotes, the hyenas, you know, all the predators away from the sheep, the babies, the women. So, anyway, violence is such an integral part of their life because it is such a hard life that I have to justify this. If they weren't fighting dogs, they were fighting karoks, which is a small bird that looks like a chicken. They were fighting chickens. Roosters fight for hours, they can fight. But, you know, they find everybody gets a little bored and they stop it. He actually takes his rooster and licks its entire body to take the blood from the other animal in his primitive way to sterilize the bird so it survives the fight. So they love their animals, but their life is violent. So violence with the animals is part of the domesticated process. Why do we domesticate these animals if they don't help us? Well, the dogs help us. I mean, the hyena. This is an animal that has a stronger jaw bite than a lion. It's the strongest jaw bite of any mammal. They live on bone marrow, so their entire diet is crushing bones. And there's no ass to them at all. They're weird looking. They're just a big head and these giant teeth. And the people fear him because unlike a dog who'll bite you and keep on bite, you know, hold that one bite, a hyena will bite you 50 times while you're trying to figure out what he's doing to you. You know, so you've got more puncture wounds up and down your arm than you even want to count. And he's got the most infectious mouth in the world, eating nothing but rotten meat and what's left on the bone and the bone itself after it's well, you know, cured. So, God, they're just a nightmare. And they'll go in and they'll kill twice as many sheep as they can eat just because they like the bone. They just want a bunch of spare bones laying around after everybody's cried and walked away from their flock being dead. So the nomads hate them, just hate them. They're so wasteful. And these are people that walk around and pick up the turds that their animals drop and use it to cook their bread at night. These people